At 02:14 a.m., frost cracks beneath a metal detector coil. The sound is sharp, unnatural, echoing across the quiet clearing. A lone surveyor pauses, breath fogging in the February air of northern Germany's Lüneburg Heath. His name is Marcus Feldman, a forestry technician mapping soil density anomalies for a wind farm survey scheduled for April 2023. The detector had already flagged dozens of buried shell fragments from wartime training grounds nearby. But this signal is different, dense, uniform, metallic. He kneels, gloved fingers brushing aside pine needles stiff with frost. The coil screams again, stronger now. He digs 18 centimeters into sandy soil before striking something flat. Not rusted, not fragmented, a plate. Smooth aluminum alloy, edges still sharp after 8 decades underground. Marcus exhales slowly. Training manuals instruct immediate reporting for unexploded ordnance, but this shape is wrong, too thin, too deliberate. He clears another 30 centimeters. The outline widens rectangular. Embedded rivets glint beneath soil grains. His pulse climbs. At 02:47 a.m., he calls the district authorities. By sunrise, police cordon the site with yellow tape. By 09:30, the State Office for Heritage Preservation arrives with 2 archaeologists and a bomb disposal officer. They uncover a shallow pit containing 5 plates stacked like books, each stamped with manufacturing codes dated 1944. But the 6th object beneath them stops everything. A curved section of aircraft skin, painted black on the exterior, pale wood composite visible along a fractured edge. Birch plywood laminate, aviation grade, not German, not metal framed. The archaeologist brushes dirt from a faint stencil. DZ. The remaining letters are eroded, but the spacing matches known Royal Air Force serial formats. Inside the pit lies debris from a de Havilland Mosquito. Shock ripples through the team. The Mosquito rarely crashed here. Records show only 3 losses within 120 kilometers of this location between January and April 1945. Yet this fragment bears burn scoring inconsistent with flak damage. It looks cut, deliberately separated. The archaeologist measures the panel, 62 centimeters across, too small to identify a specific aircraft. But what rests beneath changes everything. A cylindrical container sealed 44 centimeters long. Aluminum, RAF pattern storage tube, no corrosion penetration. It is intact. Authorities halt excavation. Military historians are notified within hours because Mosquito aircraft carried something unique on certain missions: high-speed reconnaissance film, navigation logs, or encrypted courier packets. However, this tube is buried alone, hidden, shallow, and far from any known crash site. Why would a Mosquito component be intentionally buried here in 1944 or 1945? Why separate it from the aircraft? Why hide it in a training zone used by German night fighters? If you want to see how this story unfolds, hit the like button. Because the moment German pilots realized the Mosquito was untouchable, may have left a secret in the ground. And the container has not yet been opened. The Mosquito pilot at the center of this mystery is not famous. He is not an ace. He is not decorated in headlines. Flight Lieutenant Arthur Neville Pembroke, age 27 in 1944, was described by instructors as precise, reserved, technically gifted. Born in Leicester in 1917, son of a railway engineer, he studied mechanical drafting before volunteering for the RAF in September 1939. He trained first on twin-engine trainers, logging 214 hours by 1941. However, his path diverged early. Instead of bomber command, he was transferred to a specialized Mosquito conversion unit in early 1943. The Mosquito demanded unusual pilots, those comfortable flying at extreme speed, low altitude, often alone at night. Pembroke fit that profile. His records show above-average instrument navigation scores and exceptional throttle discipline during engine stress tests. Yet personality reports consistently describe him as unremarkable, quiet, methodical. But that ordinariness mattered. Mosquito operations depended on pilots who followed precise flight profiles without improvisation. By late 1943, Pembroke was assigned to number 139 Squadron, operating Mosquito BMK-IX aircraft from RAF Whiten. These missions were not conventional bombing runs. They were high-speed precision strikes and pathfinder marking operations deep into occupied Europe. The strategic context explains why. By 1943, German night fighters had become highly effective against Allied bombers. Radar-guided interceptions and coordinated flak belts devastated slow formations. Bomber command losses exceeded 5% per mission over Germany. However, the Mosquito altered the equation. Constructed largely of wood, with two Rolls-Royce Merlin engines producing 1,460 horsepower each, it could exceed 400 miles per hour at altitude, faster than many German fighters early in the war. But speed alone did not define its advantage. The Mosquito's wooden structure reduced radar signature. Its small crew of two minimized weight. It flew alone or in pairs, not formations. German radar controllers often detected it too late. Interceptors launched, throttles wide, only to watch the target outrun them. Luftwaffe reports from 1943 repeatedly used the same phrase. Contact verloren durch Geschwindigkeit. Contact lost due to speed. However, German countermeasures improved rapidly. By early 1944, new variants of the Bf-109 and Fw-190 could approach Mosquito speeds at certain altitudes. Radar stations refined tracking. Night fighters began predicting Mosquito routes instead of chasing blindly. Losses, though still low, began to occur. Between January and June 1944, 8 Mosquitoes were shot down over northern Germany. One disappeared entirely near Celle on March 14. But something in Pembroke's records does not align. Official squadron logs show him flying 22 missions between November 1943 and March 1944. Precision strikes, marker drops, high-altitude photo runs. However, on March 13, 1944, his aircraft, Mosquito DZ-319, is listed as returned late minor engine overheat. No combat damage, no interception reported. Next day, March 14, DZ-319 is again listed airborne at 18:22 hours. Target, Hanover Rail Yards. Crew, Pembroke and navigator F.O. James Calder. Then nothing. The aircraft is marked, missing, presumed lost. However, German night fighter claims for that night list no Mosquito shoot-downs in that sector. Radar stations tracked a fast intruder exiting northwest Germany at 21:03 hours, still at high speed. Fuel endurance for DZ-319 was approximately 3 hours 30 minutes. Departure 18:22 would place maximum endurance near 21:52. The radar track matches that window. So how did DZ-319 vanish? Foreshadowing appears in maintenance logs. On March 10, 3 days before loss, DZ-319 received a non-standard modification entry. Auxiliary equipment installation sealed. Compartment, no further description, no equipment code, sign-off, engineering officer initials only. However, Mosquito aircraft rarely carried sealed compartments. Their internal space was tightly optimized. Any addition required operational justification. None is recorded. Then there is Pembroke's final debrief note from March 13. Pursued briefly, evaded by acceleration. No location specified. No fighter type recorded. Unusual omission for a trained RAF report. But the strangest detail lies in German records. A night fighter pilot from NJG-3, Oberleutnant Karl-Heinz Weber, reported chasing a Mosquito near the Lüneburg Heath region at approximately 20:40 on March 14. He wrote, "Target maintained course and increased distance despite full throttle. Engine limits reached. Contact lost. No victory claimed." However, his location corresponds within 12 kilometers of the 2023 excavation site. So we have a Mosquito recorded missing. German radar tracking it leaving Germany, a pursuit. Near Lüneburg Heath, and now buried Mosquito debris and a sealed RAF container found there. But there is more. RAF loss reports for DZ-319 contain a missing page between sections IV and V page, numbering jumps from 12 to 14. Investigators in 1946 noted the absence but assumed clerical damage. However, the missing section corresponds to special equipment carried. Why remove that page? And why would a Mosquito outrunning German fighters be linked to buried components far from any crash? By April 1944, Mosquito missions increasingly included courier transport. Small, high-priority packages moved faster than any aircraft interception. Sensitive materials crossed enemy territory this way. But DZ-319's logs show no courier designation. However, the auxiliary sealed compartment suggests otherwise. By 1946, RAF investigators concluded DZ-319 likely crashed at sea after engine failure. No wreckage found. Case closed. But Weber's pursuit, the radar track, and the buried panel contradict that conclusion. And if DZ-319 did not crash immediately, what they didn't know was, at 18:22 hours on March 14, 1944, Mosquito DZ-319 lifts from RAF Wyton. The takeoff is routine. Twin Merlin engines stabilize at 2,650 RPM, manifold pressure 9 pounds boost. Aircraft weight, approximately 21,600 pounds with fuel and ordnance. Official destination logged. Hanover Rail Yards, 480 kilometers southeast. Estimated flight time outbound, 1 hour 35 minutes at 310 mph cruise. Weather brief, scattered cloud at 6,000 feet, winds west-northwest 18 knots. However, DZ-319 does not climb to its standard bombing altitude of 24,000 feet. Instead, radar reconstructions suggest it levels near 8,000 feet crossing the Dutch coast at 19:05. Lower altitude reduces detection by German Wurzburg radar arrays, but increases fuel consumption by roughly 8%. Pembroke knows this. His fuel load allows 3 hours 30 minutes at cruise. At lower altitude, endurance drops toward 3 hours 10. That margin matters. But DZ-319 continues at reduced altitude for 110 kilometers inland. At 1928, German Freya radar near Bremen detects a fast single target. Speed estimated 390 mph. Heading southeast. Interceptors are not launched immediately. Mosquitoes are often ignored if not threatening priority zones. However, at 1942, DZ-319 alters course 17 degrees east, subtle but measurable. This deviation shifts track away from Hanover toward a rural corridor between Celle and Uelzen. Why leave the target path? Inside the cockpit, temperature is near freezing. At 8,000 feet in March night air, ambient outside is degrees C. Cockpit heaters struggle. Thin insulation preserves weight savings. Frost creeps along canopy edges. Engines drone at 2,650 RPM, a constant metallic roar transmitted through the plywood fuselage. Navigator Calder monitors drift angle on a luminous grid. Distance from Whiten now 340 kilometers. Fuel remaining approximately 62%. However, the mission profile no longer matches a bombing run. At 20:07, DZ-319 descends further to 4,000 feet. Radar cross-section drops again. Ground speed rises to 405 mph in denser air with engines pushed toward 10 pounds boost. Fuel burn spikes above 310 gallons per hour combined. The fuel gauge begins to slide faster than planned curves, but Pembroke holds throttle forward. Then the first obstacle appears. At 2018, searchlights ignite near Soltau, 3 beams sweeping. German flak batteries often cluster near rail junctions. DZ-319 crosses the cone at 4,000 feet, speed 410 mph. No flak bursts recorded. Either batteries fail to track or Mosquito passes too quickly. However, radar operators now classify the contact as hostile. Night fighters scramble from Fassberg Airfield at 2021. Distance to DZ-319, 58 kilometers. The pursuit begins. Oberleutnant Weber's Bf-109G6 climbs hard, engine at emergency power. Maximum speed at 6,000 feet, roughly 398 mph. He vectors toward predicted intercept. But DZ-319 accelerates again. Pembroke pushes 12 pounds boost. Briefly, engine stress zone. Mosquito speed rises near 420 mph at low altitude. Fuel consumption surges above 340 gallons per hour. Gauge passes 45% remaining. However, speed is survival. At 2034, Weber visually acquires target silhouette, twin-engine, slender fuselage. Range estimated 2.2 kilometers. He dives to gain speed. Airframe vibration increases beyond 400 mph indicated. He reports, target increasing distance despite full throttle. DZ-319 remains level, unwavering, no evasive turns. That is the Mosquito doctrine. Outrun, do not maneuver. But DZ-319 is not fleeing randomly. At 2039, it reduces altitude sharply to 2,000 feet. Terrain below, forest and heathland. Radar horizon interference increases. German ground tracking weakens. Weber follows descent, engine temperature exceeding safe limits. Coolant gauge nears red. He must throttle back or risk seizure. He chooses pursuit. Distance closes to 1.6 kilometers. Then DZ-319 accelerates again. At low altitude, Mosquito speed. Advantage peaks due to power-to-weight ratio and aerodynamic cleanliness. Weber's 109 cannot sustain 420 mph at 2,000 feet without catastrophic engine stress. His range begins widening instead of shrinking. He later writes, engines screaming at limits while target slipped away. Fuel in his own tanks drops below 30%. He breaks off at 2043. However, DZ-319 does not climb away to safety. Instead, it continues nor-northwest at 415 mph for another 9 minutes. That vector leads directly toward the Lüneburg Heath training zone. No strategic target, no rail yard, no city, just military ranges and sparse villages. Distance from Whiten now 515 kilometers, fuel remaining approximately 32%. Endurance left, roughly 40 minutes at current burn. Why fly deeper into Germany after escape? At 2052, DZ-319 reduces speed abruptly to 260 mph. Throttle pulled back. Engines cool. Aircraft descends to 800 feet. Night air smells of damp earth and pine resin rising through cockpit vents. Calder marks. Position fix against River Bend and Road Junction. Coordinates matching within 6 kilometers of the 2023 excavation site. Then comes the critical turning point. DZ-319 circles once. Radius approximately 1.4 kilometers. Altitude 700 feet. Speed 220 mph. This is not evasion. This is deliberate positioning. Below lies a cleared strip used for Wehrmacht training drops, flat sandy ground between tree lines. The Mosquito makes a low pass. At 2055, witnesses in a nearby farm later report hearing twin engines, very low, very fast, then slowing. No crash, no explosion, just engine roar fading. That aligns with DZ-319 reducing to near landing speed, around 160 mph. But mosquitoes cannot land safely on unprepared sand strips at night without lights. Unless landing was never intended. Inside the fuselage, behind the navigator's station, sits the sealed auxiliary compartment installed March 10. Dimensions approximately 45 centimeters. Accessible via removable panel. Calder releases fasteners. Air floods cabin. Pembroke holds altitude at 200 feet, speed 170 mph. Aircraft shudders in ground effect turbulence. The compartment opens. Contents, cylindrical aluminum container, 44 centimeters long, the same size found in 2023. Weight estimated 6-8 kilograms. Calder secures it to a tether. Timing window under 20 seconds. DZ-319 cannot remain low and slow longer. Radar or flak could reacquire. But DZ-319 has outrun interceptors. For now. At 2057, Pembroke stabilizes heading 310 degrees. Calder releases the container. It falls 200 feet into sand clearing. Impact force manageable due to low speed. No parachute used, none required for durability. The mission payload is delivered. But the story does not end. Because DZ-319 must still escape Germany with only 28% fuel. At 2058, throttle forward again. Mosquito accelerates brutally, 300 mph in seconds. Altitude climbs to 3,000 feet. Engines at 11 pounds boost. Fuel burn peaks. Remaining endurance now under 35 minutes. Distance to North Sea coast, 145 kilometers. Required speed, above 380 mph to reach water before empty tanks. However, engine strain has consequences. At 21:06, port engine temperature spikes. Coolant 118 degrees C danger zone. Pembroke reduces boost slightly. Speed drops to 390 mph. Fuel gauge passes 15%. Night horizon glows faint from distant fires. Cabin reeks of hot glycol coolant vapors. Calder notes drift pushing west. Then crisis escalates. At 21:12, starboard fuel feed fluctuates. Needle flickers, likely vapor lock from rapid altitude and throttle changes. Engine coughs briefly. RPM drops 200. DZ-319 loses 500 feet. Airspeed falls to 360 mph. Coast still 62 kilometers away. Fuel remaining approximately 9%. Near disaster. Pembroke crossfeeds tanks manually, valve rotation requiring 6 seconds. Engine stabilizes, but speed lost costs distance. Fuel curve now critical. At 21:17, gauge touches 5%. Estimated 7 minutes endurance at reduced power. Coastline still 28 kilometers distant. Then comes the final decision. Climb wastes fuel. Descent increases drag. Pembroke holds 1,500 feet, 370 mph optimal glide power compromise. Engines roar unevenly. Cabin vibrates harshly. Smell of overheated oil thickens. Calder calculates ditching vector if engines fail before coast. Survival odds below 20% in March North Sea temperatures of 6 degrees C. However, the Mosquito's speed remains its salvation. At 21:21, radar near Wilhelmshaven briefly detects outbound fast contact. Heading northwest. Speed estimated 380 mph. That matches DZ-319's track. Fuel gauge effectively 0. Engines now running on residual lines. At 21:23, coastline appears, dark band separating land and sea. DZ-319 crosses at 1,200 feet. Seconds later, starboard engine flames out. RPM collapses. Aircraft yaws violently. Pembroke counters with rudder. Port engine still producing power, but fuel nearly gone. Arrival at water does not mean safety. At 21:24, port engine also sputters. Both tanks dry. DZ-319 becomes a 9-ton glider over the North Sea. Distance from shore, 4.8 kilometers. Altitude, 1,000 feet. Glide ratio roughly 11:1 gives theoretical 3.3 kilometers. Shortfall, 1.5 kilometers. Inevitable ditching. At 21:26, DZ-319 impacts water. Witnessed by no one. No radio call recorded. Coordinates estimated 53 degrees 58 and 7 degrees 12 E. Aircraft brakes, sinks within minutes. Crew fate unconfirmed. But the container already lies buried inland. Immediate outcome: German fighters report Mosquito escaped. RAF logs aircraft missing over sea. No one connects the low pass over Lüneburg Heath. No search conducted inland. And so the day German pilots realized the Mosquito was untouchable ended with a secret left in sand. But what they didn't know, the drop zone would remain undiscovered for 79 years. In April 1944, RAF intelligence begins asking quiet questions. DZ-319's loss report arrives at Bomber Command Headquarters on April 3, stamped routine. Aircraft missing over North Sea after Hanover operation. Fuel. Exhaustion likely. No survivors. Case category, operational loss. Yet analysts notice one inconsistency immediately. German interception claims for March 14 list none matching the aircraft's route or time. Normally, Mosquito losses involved either flak bursts or night fighter engagement. Here, there is neither. However, the discrepancy does not trigger urgency. Mosquito survivability rates are high. Crews occasionally vanish without trace over water. Investigators request radar correlation from coastal command stations. Returns confirm outbound fast contact at 21:21 hours near Wilhelmshaven, consistent with DZ-319's predicted fuel endurance. That supports the official version. Aircraft escaped Germany, then ditched at sea. But an intelligence officer, Squadron Leader Peter Hargreaves, remains unsettled. He notes that DZ-319 flew unusually low for much of the mission. Radar height estimates rarely exceed 8,000 feet. Standard Mosquito bombing runs occurred above 20,000. Low altitude. Profiles suggested either weather avoidance or special tasking. Hargreaves requests the aircraft's equipment manifest. File arrives April 18. Page numbering jumps from 12 to 14. The missing page corresponds to Section V, Special Equipment Carried. Hargreaves writes a margin note. Confirm content. Records Office responds. Page likely damaged. No duplicate exists. However, maintenance logs still show the March 10 auxiliary compartment installation. That modification should appear in Section V. It does not. Interrogations follow quietly. Ground crew from RAF Whiten are interviewed May 2. Engine fitters confirm DZ-319 received non-standard internal bracket mounting behind navigator's station. They describe installing a sealed frame but were not told purpose. One fitter recalls weight approximately 7 kilograms added. However, no equipment serial recorded. They assume camera or radio relay device. Hargreaves asks the navigator training unit about courier tasks. Response: mosquitoes. Occasionally carried sealed containers for special duties branch. Such missions classified separately. DZ-319 Squadron 139 not normally assigned courier transport. However, exceptions existed. In June 1944, Hargreaves drafts memorandum suggesting DZ-319 may have carried sensitive material. Recommendation: review German radar intercept logs for low-altitude deviations. The request stalls. D-Day operations dominate priorities. Mosquito losses are low importance compared to invasion logistics. By October 1944, the inquiry is shelved. After the war in 1946, RAF Missing Research and Inquiry Service revisits unresolved aircraft disappearances. DZ-319 again reviewed. Analysts compiled German records captured from Luftwaffe archives. Among them lies Oberleutnant Weber's report of pursuing a mosquito near Lüneburg Heath at 20:40 March 14. However, investigators assume it refers to another aircraft. Why? Because DZ-319's plotted route goes to Hanover, not Lüneburg. Weber's position lies 70 kilometers north of Hanover track. Investigators consider misidentification likely. Mosquito sightings were frequent. Without wreckage, DZ-319 remains classified lost at sea. File closed November 1946. But the missing page remains unexplained. For Arthur Pembroke, official history ends in absence. His parents received telegram April 1944, missing in action. Presumed dead January 1945. His personal effects returned, uniform, watch, logbook up to March 13. No mention of special mission. No sealed compartment. No deviation inland. The mosquito that outran German fighters becomes another statistic. However, investigators decades later sense unease. In 1972, aviation historian Dr. Martin Keller reviews German night fighter logs for a book on mosquito operations. He notices Weber's March 14 pursuit entry. He cross-references RAF losses that night. Only one mosquito missing in region, DZ-319, but routes do not match. Keller annotates, possible nav error. He suspects RAF misplotting. Yet, without wreckage, theory remains speculation. Time passes. Pembroke's navigator, James Calder, is also listed missing. Family's age. Files rest in archives. But Keller revisits case in 1984 while researching low-altitude mosquito tactics. He obtains maintenance summaries showing auxiliary compartment installed March 10. That contradicts the official narrative. Why install equipment 3 days before routine bombing run? However, Records Office cannot locate Section V page. Keller writes to RAF Archives requesting clarification. Response: no further data available. He publishes brief notes suggesting DZ-319 may have flown reconnaissance rather than bombing. The theory receives little attention. Mosquito history is vast, single aircraft anomalies rarely pursued. Yet Keller remains suspicious. In 1991, after German reunification, new Luftwaffe documents emerge. Among them is Weber's original handwritten log. It includes coordinates more precise than typed summary: 52 degrees 57, 10 degrees 18, directly over Lüneburg Heath. Keller overlays RAF track charts. If DZ-319 deviated north 17 degrees after Bremen, it would pass exactly there. But no crash recorded. Keller hypothesizes ditching at sea after inland incursion. He writes unpublished paper proposing DZ-319 executed low-level reconnaissance before loss. Still, without physical evidence, hypothesis remains conjecture. Decades slip by. Pembroke's name appears only in memorial rolls. Calder's relatives retain a photograph of the two beside a Mosquito in 1943, smiling, ordinary, unaware of vanishing futures. Investigators retire. Archives digitize. Paper fades. And the buried container remains beneath sand and pine roots. The secret died with him, or so they thought. In May 2023, excavation begins under controlled military supervision. The Lüneburg Heath site is grid-marked into 1-meter squares. Team size: 11 specialists, 2 aviation archaeologists, 1 RAF historian, 1 materials scientist, 3 ordnance technicians, 2 forensic conservators, and 2 geospatial surveyors. Ground-penetrating radar sweeps extend 20 meters beyond the initial pit. Depth anomalies appear at 35 centimeters and 62 centimeters. However, the sealed container remains untouched. Protocol requires contextual excavation first. Over 3 days, the team removes 2.4 cubic meters of sandy soil. Temperature averages 14 degrees C. Soil moisture low, preserving organic material. Within 1.8 meters of the container, they recover additional Mosquito fragments, plywood laminate shards, doped fabric, and a small aluminum latch stamped de Havilland 1943. None show explosive tearing. Edges are clean, cut, or stress-fractured. This suggests deliberate separation. But the first chamber reveal lies deeper. At 62 centimeters, radar anomaly resolves into a shallow depression lined with compacted sand. It forms a rectangular cavity roughly 90 by 60 centimeters. The Mosquito fragments were arranged within it before burial. Archaeologists identify orientation consistent with low-speed drop impact, then manual repositioning. Someone handled these pieces on the ground. However, no human remains appear. Instead, they uncover a second object, a leather strap fragment with brass buckle, RAF pattern harness webbing. Carbon dating later confirms 1940s manufacture. The strap is cut cleanly, not torn. It likely secured the cylindrical container during transport or release. This is the first confirmation. DZ-319 did not crash here. It dropped equipment intentionally. But Chamber 2 holds more. At the cavity's northern edge, conservators uncover a shallow boot impression preserved in compact sand beneath fragments. Length 29 centimeters. consistent with RAF flight boot size 910. Orientation faces south, toward the drop vector calculated from flight path modeling. Depth indicates approximately 80 kilogram load bearing briefly. However, the imprint lacks heel drag, typical of landing stride. It resembles a single step, or brace. This suggests a crewman briefly contacted ground or stood on dropped debris during retrieval or concealment. Yet DZ-319 was airborne. How could a crewman step here? One hypothesis emerges, parachute descent. But no canopy fragments found, no harness metal, no burial pit for body. The second reveal deepens the mystery. Then container recovery begins. On May 19 at 11:42, ordnance technicians stabilized the aluminum cylinder. Length, 44.2 centimeters, diameter 11.6 centimeters, weight 6.3 kilograms, RAF storage tube pattern consistent with courier dispatch containers used by Special Duties Branch, seal integrity intact, corrosion minimal, serial stamping faint but legible, AM 1444. But container number 1 held nothing explosive. X-ray imaging reveals internal rolled materials and a smaller inner capsule. No detonation risk. At 14:05, the seal is opened inside a mobile conservation tent. Inside lies Chamber 3. A rolled linen map, treated scale 1/100,000. Region, Northern Germany, centered on Lüneburg Heath. Overlaid grease pencil markings show a flight line deviating from Hanover route. Coordinates correspond precisely with the excavation site. Margin notation, drop 2057. That matches DZ-319's estimated release time, 2057 hours. However, the map is signed. Initials JC in RAF Navigator hand style, James Calder. This confirms the crew planned the drop. But the map includes something else. 3 additional circles marked westward toward the Dutch coast, each labeled with times. 21:06, 21:12, 21:17. These align with the later fuel crisis timeline reconstructed from radar. Calder anticipated progressive engine stress after drop. He charted escape waypoints precisely. This is operational planning, beyond a simple courier release. However, the inner capsule remains sealed. It measures 18 centimeters long, brass-threaded ends. Weight, 1.1 kilograms. X-ray shows stacked thin sheets and a metallic plate. Team pauses. This is chamber 4. Opening occurs May 20 at 09:18. Inside lie microfilm reels, 3 spools totaling 72 frames each, and a folded metal tag engraved with aircraft serial, DZ-319. The microfilm is stabilized, scanned, and projected that evening. Images appear, aerial reconnaissance photographs. Targets include rail junctions near Hanover, Bremen docks, and oil storage near Hamburg. Standard Mosquito recon content. However, frame 43 changes everything. It shows Fassberg Airfield, the very base from which Weber launched pursuit. Captured March 13, 1944. High resolution, aircraft dispersal patterns visible. Night fighter parking revetments marked. This is tactical intelligence. But frame 61 is unprecedented. It shows Wuisberg radar installation array geometry with measurement overlays. Someone had annotated radar frequencies and rotation arcs. That data would allow precise low-altitude penetration planning. Such analysis normally occurred in Britain, not over Germany. Why carry this inland? But Container number 5 held something that changed everything. Within the capsule's base lies a folded document sealed in waxed paper, opened under low humidity conditions. It is a typed sheet stamped secret. Date, March 11, 1944. Header, Operational Courier Directive Special Duties Branch. The instruction reads, Mosquito DZ-319 to transport package, Raven 3 to designated ground contact zone L. Release by low altitude drop. No landing, no radio acknowledgement. Confirmation via signal flare not required. Destruction of aircraft acceptable if interception imminent. Zone L-17 corresponds exactly to Lüneburg Heath coordinates. This was not reconnaissance. It was delivery to ground agents inside Germany. Expert analysis begins immediately. Forensic linguists confirm RAF typewriter model used by Special Duties Branch. Paper fiber matches British wartime stock. Signature block redacted. However, directive number aligns with known SOE courier operations supplying resistance. Cells in occupied Europe. But Germany itself had minimal Allied ground networks. Cryptographic historians analyze microfilm annotations. They match British radar countermeasure research programs from early 1944. Delivering such data inside Germany suggests coordination with infiltrated assets capable of sabotage or intelligence relay. However, no known resistance group in Lüneburg region fits. Architectural analysis of burial cavity shows deliberate concealment. Soil layering indicates manual covering within 15 minutes of drop. Boot impression suggests a single individual present. No parachute debris implies that person was already on ground, agent awaiting delivery. DNA recovery from leather strap yields degraded human epithelial traces. Sequencing reveals male European profile, not matching RAF crew families. The ground recipient existed. Then final chamber emerges. At the container's base cap interior, previously overlooked, conservators discover a thin engraved insert plate. 9 by 3 centimeters, text. Pembroke return if able. Below coordinates, 52 degrees 5712 N, 10 degrees 1803 E. The drop site itself. This was personal. Pembroke anticipated survival and retrieval. The ultimate truth crystallizes. DZ-319's mission was not only to deliver intelligence, it was to return later for recovery. But fuel exhaustion prevented that. The Mosquito escaped fighters, completed the drop, then died at sea before rendezvous. The day German pilots realized the Mosquito was untouchable was also the day a covert courier reached Germany's interior. And the ground agent who retrieved it remains unidentified. The revelation forces historians to reconsider Mosquito operations over Germany. Until now, Allied ground infiltration inside the Reich proper in 1944 was considered nearly non-existent. Special Operations Executive Networks operated mainly in France, the Low Countries, and Poland. Germany's internal security and Gestapo surveillance made agent survival improbable. However, DZ-319's directive proves otherwise. Zone L was an active reception site. An agent stood waiting at 2057 March 14, 1944. He concealed Mosquito debris and container within minutes. He left a boot impression and epithelial trace, then vanished into Germany carrying microfilm of radar installations and airfield layouts. This explains several anomalies. In April 1944, RAF Mosquito losses to German night fighters decreased unexpectedly in northern sectors. German radar coverage disruptions occurred near Celle and Ulsan. Two Wurzburg arrays reported unexplained calibration errors May 1944. At the time, causes were unknown. This explains why. The delivered intelligence likely enabled sabotage or signal interference from within. It also clarifies DZ-319's route deviation. Pembroke was not lost or evading randomly. He was executing a precisely timed courier insertion at 20:57, then racing fuel margins to escape. Weber's pursuit record, target increased distance despite full throttle, captures the moment Mosquito's speed made the mission possible. German pilots realized interception was futile. Investigators long dismissed Keller's 1972 theory of inland incursion. He proposed navigation error. In reality, he was partially correct. DZ-319 did enter Lüneburg corridor intentionally. The missing section V page concealed courier equipment. RAF erased it to protect the ground network. Vindication follows. Hargreaves's 1944 suspicion of special equipment was accurate. Keller's later mapping of Weber coordinates to DZ-319 was correct. Both lacked physical proof. The 2023 excavation confirms their instincts. Wider implications emerge. If one courier reached Germany interior, others may have. Archives now re-examine unexplained Mosquito deviations between January and June 1944. 3 additional aircraft show similar low-altitude tracks near Ruhr and Saxony regions. No known drops recorded. Unresolved investigations continue. The ground agent at Zone L-17 remains. Unknown, DNA comparison against wartime German resistance databases yields no match. Possibilities include Wehrmacht dissidents, forced labor contacts, or embedded SOE operative. The network that received Raven 3 is still invisible. History adjusts quietly. The Mosquito was not only untouchable in speed, it was a courier penetrating the Reich itself. Among the Mosquito fragments, conservators find one object that does not belong to aircraft structure. It is a small leather wallet, flattened by soil pressure and lodged beneath plywood laminate shards. Dimensions, 11 by 8 centimeters. The leather is cracked but intact, RAF brown pattern. Inside, preserved by low moisture, lies a single photograph and a folded paper slip. Both belong to Arthur Pembroke. The photograph shows 2 men beside a Mosquito nose cone, dated faintly, Whiten 43. Pembroke stands on the left, flight cap tucked under arm, expression neutral, almost shy. Navigator James Calder leans against the fuselage, grinning. The aircraft serial behind them is partially visible. DZ-3, the rest obscured by glare. It is DZ-319 before its final mission. The folded slip carries handwriting in pencil. Fuel calc revised. Margin thin after drop. If retrieval delayed, container secure. The hand matches Pembroke's logbook samples. No embellishment, no fear, just calculation. It is the quiet voice of a pilot measuring distance against endurance. He expected to return. The engraved plate inside the container, return if able, echoes that hope. However, he never did. RAF casualty records indicate Pembroke listed missing April 1944, presumed dead January 1945. Calder's status identical. No burial location. No wreckage recovered. Families received standard condolences. In Leicester, Pembroke's parents kept his room unchanged until 1947. His father died 1952. His mother in 1968. Neither learned of the courier mission. Calder's niece, Margaret Ellis, still lives in Surrey. When contacted in 2024, she recognizes the photograph immediately. That was always on his mantle, she says. He never talked about missions, just that the aircraft was fast. She studies the wallet image, then the penciled fuel note. Her voice softens. He thought he might come back for it. She declines romantic language. No heroism claimed, only absence acknowledged. He and Arthur were ordinary men doing frightening work. I'm glad someone finally knows where they went. The Mosquito debris now rests in conservation storage. The wallet and photograph are stabilized. The penciled note remains legible, graphite pressed into wartime paper fibers. It is the last surviving sentence written by Arthur Pembroke. His final years consisted only of that night flight, 1822 to 2126, 3 hours 4 minutes. And a return he could not make. In the end, speed was never the Mosquito's only weapon. It was precision measured in minutes and kilometers, in fuel gauges sliding toward zero while engines screamed beyond safety limits. German fighters learned they could not catch it, but they never knew what passed beneath them at 20:57 on March 14, 1944. A cylinder falling into dark sand, carrying intelligence meant to fracture radar defenses from within. Sometimes history hides in the distance between pursuit and escape. At 02:14 a.m., frost cracked beneath a metal detector coil. Beneath that same ground, the mission Arthur Pembroke finished, but never returned to retrieve, waited 79 years. The container now resides in the German Aviation Museum archive, catalogued as Raven 3 Courier Deposit. The drop site remains protected heathland, coordinates unchanged since 1944. Comment which mystery we should investigate next.